Have you ever faced a problem so big, so overwhelming, that it felt impossible to overcome? Like a giant standing in front of you, daring you to take a step. Now imagine this: what if the real power to defeat your giants didn't come from your strength, but from something much deeper, something invisible? Throughout history, two of the most dangerous giants ever recorded in the Bible, Goliath and Og, seemed unbeatable, terrifying, and untouchable. But here's the controversial truth: their downfall had nothing to do with the size of their opponents or the weapons used. It was something far more surprising, and counterintuitive, that gave victory. What if I told you that the key to defeating the biggest challenges in your life isn't fighting harder, but believing in something greater? The giants you face today, whether it's financial stress, emotional pain, or fear of the future, aren't as unbeatable as they seem. In fact, what's holding you back might be the very thing that sets you free. In just a few moments, you'll discover the same secret that brought down the mightiest giants in history, and it could change how you approach every challenge from here on out. Curious? Let's dive into the real truth about how these giants were defeated, and how you can apply that to your own life, starting today. When we think of giants, we often imagine creatures from myths or legends, but the Bible tells us about real giants who once walked the earth. These giants, like Goliath and Og, were fearsome enemies that Israel faced during their journey to the Promised Land. Described as towering figures with immense strength, they struck fear into the hearts of many. But who were these giants? According to biblical texts, the first mention of giants appears in Genesis, where the Nephilims are described as offspring of the sons of God and the daughters of men, Genesis 6 verse 4. These beings were known for their overwhelming power and size. As time went on, their descendants continued to roam the earth, especially in regions like Canaan, where Israel would later have to face them in battle. Though they were physically powerful, these giants also represented more than just physical threats. They symbolized immense challenges that the Israelites had to overcome to reach their divine destiny. Throughout their history, the Israelites faced these formidable foes, often relying on their faith in God to overcome what seemed like impossible odds. Despite their size and strength, these giants were not invincible. The Bible records several instances where they were defeated, not by might alone, but by those who placed their trust in the Lord. These stories remind us that no matter how big the obstacle, with faith and courage, even giants can be brought down. As we journey through the stories of the two most dangerous giants in the Bible, we'll see why they were so feared and how their defeat teaches us timeless lessons about courage, faith, and the power of God's will. The Nephilims, the rise of the giants in the Bible. The Nephilim are one of the most mysterious figures in the Bible. Mentioned briefly in Genesis, their origin has sparked countless debates among scholars and believers alike. They were said to be the offspring of the sons of God and daughters of men, a union that resulted in these gigantic beings with unimaginable power. What made the Nephilim so dangerous wasn't just their size, it was their influence. They were said to be warriors of old, famous men of renown. Their strength was legendary, and they were seen as a symbol of corruption on earth. As they multiplied, the world grew darker, leading to a state where wickedness prevailed, which eventually led to the Great Flood. Though the flood wiped out much of humanity, the Nephilim lineage didn't disappear completely. We see their presence again during Israel's journey to the Promised Land, with remnants of these giant clans inhabiting regions like Canaan. The Israelites, preparing to conquer these lands, feared the giants, believing they were impossible to defeat. However, as powerful as the Nephilim descendants were, the Bible teaches that physical might alone doesn't guarantee victory. God's hand was always at work, guiding his people through their darkest fears. These stories of giants serve as a metaphor for the seemingly insurmountable problems we face in life. Just like the Nephilim, our challenges may seem too big to overcome, but with faith and trust in God, even the largest obstacles can be conquered. The historical context: battles in the Promised Land. The Promised Land wasn't just a land flowing with milk and honey, it was also a battlefield filled with dangers. Among those dangers were the giants, descendants of the Nephilim who ruled certain territories. For the Israelites, stepping into this land meant engaging in warfare with enemies far more powerful and experienced than they were. When Moses sent out spies to scout the land of Canaan, their report was filled with fear. They described seeing giants and feeling like grasshoppers in comparison, Numbers 13:33. These giants represented a significant threat, not just physically, but mentally and spiritually as well. Many in Israel were so frightened that they doubted God's promise, forgetting that God had already performed miraculous deeds to free them from Egypt. However, not all were afraid. Leaders like Caleb and Joshua reminded the people that with God on their side, no enemy was too big to defeat. This moment highlights an important lesson: the real battle isn't always about physical strength, it's about maintaining faith in the face of overwhelming fear. In this historical context, we see a recurring theme: giants as symbols of fear and doubt. The Israelites had to learn that, no matter how powerful their enemies seemed, their true strength came from God's promises. It's a lesson we can apply in our own lives, where the giants we face might be situations that feel too big to handle, but with faith, no challenge is too great. Goliath, the Philistine giant who challenged Israel. No discussion about giants in the Bible is complete without talking about Goliath, the most famous giant of all. Standing at over 9 feet tall, this Philistine warrior was not just physically intimidating but also well-armed and highly skilled in battle. Every day, for 40 days, Goliath taunted the Israelite army, challenging them to send someone to fight him one-on-one. But no one dared. Goliath's sheer size, combined with his armor and weaponry, made him seem invincible. The Israelites were terrified, seeing Goliath as a living embodiment of their greatest fears. However, this all changed when a young shepherd named David stepped forward. Unlike the trained soldiers, David's confidence wasn't in his own strength, it was in God. Armed with just a sling and 5 smooth stones, David faced Goliath, declaring that it was God who would deliver the victory. And with a single stone, he brought the mighty giant to the ground. This wasn't just a story of physical defeat, it was a lesson in faith overcoming fear. David showed that no matter how big the enemy is, if you trust in God, you can achieve the impossible. Goliath represents the giants we face in life, whether it's fear, doubt, or overwhelming challenges. Like David, we need to remember that our strength comes from something greater than ourselves. Faith can turn even the smallest among us into giant slayers. The power of Goliath: size, strength, and weaponry. What made Goliath so terrifying wasn't just his size, it was his whole presence. Standing over 9 feet tall, he was a literal giant, clad in heavy armor that weighed more than some people. His spear was described as having a shaft like a weaver's rod, and his sword was massive, made for a warrior of his stature. Goliath wasn't just a big man, he was a symbol of invincibility for the Philistines. They believed that no one could defeat him in single combat, which is why they allowed him to taunt the Israelites day after day. His size and strength created a psychological battle that affected the entire army of Israel. No one wanted to be the one to face this walking fortress. But as we see in the story, all of Goliath's strength and weapons were no match for faith. David didn't need heavy armor or a massive sword, he just needed a stone, a sling, and a trust in God. In this story, Goliath's power was his undoing, as his overconfidence made him blind to the fact that real strength doesn't come from muscles or weapons. The story of David and Goliath teaches us that the biggest battles we face aren't always about physical strength. Sometimes the greatest power comes from within, from our faith, our courage, and our trust in something bigger than ourselves. No matter how big the giants in our lives may be, they can be overcome with the right mindset and faith. The second giant, the last of the Rephaim, Og, king of Bashan. While Goliath is often the most remembered giant, there was another fearsome giant in the Bible, Og, king of Bashan. Og was one of the last of the Rephaim, another race of giants, and he ruled over a vast kingdom in the land of Bashan. Described as a mighty warrior, Og was no ordinary king. He was an enormous figure whose very presence inspired fear among his enemies. Og's kingdom stood as one of the last significant obstacles for the Israelites during their journey to the Promised Land. Like Goliath, Og was known for his massive size and strength. The Bible gives us an intriguing detail about him. His bed was made of iron and measured about 13 feet long and 6 feet wide, Deuteronomy 3 verse 11. This suggests that Og was even larger than Goliath, towering over ordinary men. Despite his size and power, Og's fate was similar to that of Goliath. When the Israelites fought against him, they were victorious, not because they were stronger or better equipped, but because they had God on their side. This story shows that no matter how invincible someone seems, if they oppose God's will, their downfall is inevitable. Og's defeat is a reminder that physical size and strength can't stand against divine power. Just like David and Goliath, the Israelites' victory over Og teaches us that with faith and the backing of God, no challenge is too great. Og might have been the last of his kind, but his defeat is a timeless lesson about the true source of strength. Og and his gigantic iron bed, a symbol of power. One of the most fascinating details about Og is the description of his iron bed. Measuring 13 feet long and 6 feet wide, the sheer size of this bed was meant to showcase Og's immense stature. It wasn't just a piece of furniture, it was a symbol of his dominance and the fear he inspired in others. Og was one of the last surviving giants, and his bed served as a reminder of the physical power he wielded. But why mention the bed? In biblical times, iron was a precious material, often associated with strength and endurance. The fact that Og's bed was made of iron emphasized his enduring power and status as a formidable king. It's a detail that communicates the message: this is not just any man, this is a giant among giants. However, despite all of these symbols of power, his massive size, his iron bed, and his reputation, Og was ultimately no match for the Israelites. With God on their side, they overcame him and his kingdom, showing once again that divine power triumphs over human strength, no matter how intimidating it may seem. This story reminds us that the things we use to measure power, size, wealth, or material possessions, are not the ultimate indicators of strength. True strength comes from having faith and trusting in something bigger than ourselves. Og's bed might have been enormous, but it didn't save him when the time for judgment came. Giants as symbols of spiritual obstacles. In the Bible, giants like Goliath and Og are more than just physical beings, they also serve as powerful symbols of the spiritual obstacles we face in life. Their massive size and overwhelming strength represent the challenges that often seem impossible to overcome, whether it's fear, doubt, or temptation. These giants are metaphors for the battles we all must fight within ourselves. For the Israelites, facing giants wasn't just about defeating a physical enemy. It was about overcoming the fear that paralyzed them and threatened their faith. When the spies first saw the giants in Canaan, they were terrified and doubted God's promise, thinking there was no way they could succeed. This reaction mirrors how we sometimes feel when faced with overwhelming problems. The giants in our lives can take many forms. They might be financial struggles, relationship issues, or even personal doubts that prevent us from moving forward. Just like the Israelites, we may feel small and incapable when facing these giants. But the stories of Goliath and Og remind us that with faith, no obstacle is too big to overcome. In these stories, it wasn't the physical strength of the Israelites that won the day, it was their trust in God. This teaches us that our greatest weapon against spiritual giants is faith. When we place our trust in God and move forward with courage, we can conquer any challenge, no matter how impossible it seems. The weakness of giants, how they were defeated. Despite their towering stature and overwhelming power, the giants of the Bible were not invincible. Goliath was brought down by a simple stone, and Og, despite his immense size, was defeated by the Israelites. These stories teach us an important lesson: no matter how formidable an enemy appears, there is always a way to overcome them with the right approach. In Goliath's case, his defeat came from an unexpected source. He was prepared for battle against seasoned warriors, but it was a young shepherd, David, who brought him down. Armed with only a sling and a deep trust in God, David proved that it's not always about strength, it's about strategy, faith, and courage. Similarly, Og, the king of Bashan, may have had a massive bed and a kingdom at his command, but when the Israelites faced him under the leadership of Moses, his size didn't protect him. His defeat showed that even the mightiest giants are vulnerable when they stand against God's will. The weakness of giants lies in their overconfidence and reliance on physical strength. Goliath underestimated David, and Og likely believed his size alone would intimidate his enemies. In both cases, it wasn't brute force that won the battle, it was faith and a reliance on God's guidance. These stories remind us that our own giants, whether they are personal struggles or external challenges, have their weaknesses. With faith and the right perspective, we can find ways to overcome even the most daunting obstacles. The fear giants inspired in Israel. One of the most striking elements of the stories of Goliath and Og is the fear they inspired. When Israel first saw these giants, their immediate reaction was one of overwhelming terror. The size and strength of these enemies made the Israelites feel small and powerless. This fear was so intense that, at times, it paralyzed the entire nation. When the 12 spies were sent to scout the Promised Land, 10 of them returned with reports that frightened the people. They described the giants in Canaan and compared themselves to grasshoppers in their sight, Numbers 13:33. This fear led to doubt, and many Israelites lost faith in God's promise. They couldn't see past the physical threat of the giants to the power of their God. But fear is often an illusion, magnifying the problem and making it seem bigger than it really is. The stories of David and Moses show that when you face your fears head-on, especially with faith in God, you can overcome even the most terrifying obstacles. David didn't let Goliath's size scare him, he saw an opportunity to prove God's power. Moses trusted that God would deliver Israel from Og, no matter how powerful the king appeared. In life, we all face giants that inspire fear, whether they're personal challenges or external threats. These giants can make us doubt ourselves and even doubt God's promises. But if we hold on to our faith and trust in God's plan, we can overcome any fear, just as the Israelites overcame the giants in their path. The role of faith in overcoming giants. In both the stories of David and Goliath and Og, king of Bashan, there's one key element that led to victory: faith. It wasn't David's skill with a sling or the Israelites' military strength that brought these giants down, it was their trust in God. Faith is a recurring theme in these battles, showing that true power lies in trusting a force greater than ourselves. David, a young shepherd with no battle experience, faced Goliath, a seasoned warrior, with only a sling and a few stones. But David had something far more powerful, a deep faith that God would deliver him. He didn't see Goliath as an unbeatable foe, he saw him as an obstacle that God had already given him the power to overcome. David's faith allowed him to move forward with courage and precision, bringing down the giant with a single stone. Similarly, the Israelites had to rely on their faith when facing Og, who represented a significant threat as one of the last Rephaim giants. Moses led the people with the belief that God had already given them the victory, and their faith in his promise guided them to success. Faith allows us to see beyond the physical reality of a situation. It transforms the impossible into the achievable. In life, our giants may seem overwhelming, but with faith, we can move forward with confidence, knowing that God is with us, fighting on our behalf. Faith turns fear into courage and doubt into determination. The psychological impact of facing giants. The presence of giants like Goliath and Og in the Bible wasn't just about physical intimidation, they had a profound psychological effect on their enemies. When faced with such towering figures, the initial reaction is often fear and self-doubt. The Israelites experienced this firsthand, with Goliath standing as a literal giant and a metaphor for the overwhelming challenges they felt powerless to defeat. When the Israelite army saw Goliath step forward day after day, their morale sank. He was a constant reminder of their own perceived inadequacies. The fear that Goliath inspired paralyzed them, making them feel small and incapable of victory. Similarly, when the spies saw the giants in Canaan, their reports were filled with despair, saying they were like grasshoppers in comparison. This sense of being outmatched psychologically defeated them before they even fought. But in both cases, the lesson is that fear is often an exaggeration of reality. David didn't let the sight of Goliath's size diminish his confidence. Instead, he trusted in his ability and, more importantly, in God's strength. By stepping out in faith, David showed that the biggest battles are often fought in the mind, and overcoming fear is the first step toward victory. This principle applies in our own lives. When faced with daunting challenges, whether they are personal, financial, or emotional, we often feel overwhelmed, much like the Israelites did. But when we confront these psychological giants with faith and determination, we can break through the mental barriers that hold us back. The key is recognizing that the real battle starts in the mind. The role of divine intervention in defeating giants. The downfall of both Goliath and Og was not just due to human effort, it was clearly the result of divine intervention. In the Bible, God is portrayed as the ultimate force behind these victories, showing that human strength alone is not enough to overcome seemingly insurmountable odds. The victories over these giants are a testament to God's active role in the lives of his people. In David's battle against Goliath, we see that his confidence wasn't in his own abilities, but in God's intervention. David proclaimed that the battle belonged to the Lord, and it was God who would deliver the victory, 1 Samuel 17 verse 47. This faith in divine intervention allowed David to face Goliath without fear, trusting that God would guide his hand. And indeed, the stone that felled Goliath was a direct result of God's hand in the battle. Similarly, when the Israelites fought against Og, their victory was not attributed to their military might. In Deuteronomy 3 verse 3, it is clear that it was the Lord who delivered Og and his people into their hands. The defeat of Og was another instance of God's protection and guidance, showing that no matter how large or powerful the enemy, God's intervention is always decisive. These stories remind us that in life's greatest challenges, we are not alone. When we face giants, whether literal or metaphorical, divine intervention can make the impossible possible. With God on our side, no obstacle is too great, and no enemy is too powerful. Faith in his intervention is what leads to victory. Overcoming modern-day giants, lessons from Goliath and Og. The stories of Goliath and Og are not just ancient tales, they are filled with timeless lessons for us today. While we may not face literal giants, we all encounter challenges in life that seem insurmountable. These modern-day giants could be anything from financial difficulties, health crises, relationship struggles, or personal fears. The key takeaway from these biblical giants is that no matter the size of the problem, it can be overcome with faith and perseverance. Goliath and Og both represent the overwhelming obstacles we encounter in life. They were larger-than-life figures who inspired fear and doubt, much like our own problems can. But just as David and the Israelites found victory through faith and courage, so too can we find ways to conquer our giants. One of the main lessons is that size and strength are not the final say in any battle. Whether you're facing an intimidating opponent at work, a medical diagnosis that seems impossible to overcome, or a personal fear that's holding you back, the stories of these giants show that victory comes from trusting in God and having the courage to face challenges head-on. We can draw inspiration from David, who, despite being an underdog, used what he had, his faith and a simple sling, to achieve victory. This teaches us that we don't need to be the strongest or most skilled to overcome challenges. We just need to trust in God's plan, use the tools we have, and move forward with confidence. Faith versus fear, the ultimate lesson from biblical giants. At the heart of the stories of Goliath and Og is a lesson about the battle between faith and fear. Both giants struck fear into the hearts of the people they faced, making them doubt their ability to succeed. But in both cases, it was faith that ultimately led to victory. These stories show that the greatest battle we fight is not with external giants, but with the internal forces of fear and doubt. When the Israelites first saw Goliath, they were terrified. He was a seasoned warrior, and his size alone was enough to make them feel powerless. But David saw something different. Instead of being overwhelmed by fear, he was filled with faith. He knew that with God on his side, there was no reason to fear Goliath's strength. The same is true for Og. His iron bed and massive size were symbols of his dominance, but they couldn't protect him from the Israelites' faith in God. When faced with the unknown and the terrifying, the Israelites learned that faith would always triumph over fear. This is the ultimate lesson we can take from these stories: when faced with our own giants, we must choose faith over fear. Fear paralyzes and keeps us from moving forward, but faith empowers and leads us to victory. Whether it's a personal challenge or a life-altering decision, faith gives us the strength to overcome any obstacle. So, now that you know the truth behind the defeat of Goliath and Og, ask yourself this: what giants are you facing right now? What obstacles in your life seem too big, too powerful, or too impossible to overcome? Are you still trying to fight them with your own strength, or is it time to let faith take the lead? The battles we face may look different, but the solution remains the same: trusting in something greater than ourselves. Here's the real question: what would change in your life if you stopped being paralyzed by fear and started walking in faith? Imagine what victories you could achieve if you truly believed that the power to conquer your giants is already within your grasp. Are you ready to stop running and start winning? Let me know in the comments what giants you're facing today, and how this knowledge has changed the way you look at your battles. I'd love to hear your story, and maybe together, we can uncover the next steps for your victory. And before you go, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss out on more life-changing insights from the Bible. There's so much more to learn, and this is just the beginning of your journey to victory.